Everybody, and welcome to another Crock Pot Wednesday. And while today's recipe I'm not going to make in a crock pot, you sure can make it in one. But I'm going to share with you a little bit of story behind this crock pot recipe. Today's story comes to you by my friends Tim and Tammy. And on Thursday's video I'm going to share with you our day trip, where we went and what we did. But I'm going to share with you a little bit what they brought me. So what I'm going to share with you today is a little bit of a backdrop to this recipe. And we are going to make baked beans, but we're going to make them in a bean pot. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about what is a bean pot and why I wanted one so badly. Tim and Tammy, my friends from Tim's World, came to visit us again on Saturday. We spent the day together and had so much fun. Tim and Tammy love the things that I do. They love going to thrift stores and they love finding all kinds of treasures, just like I do. And there is such an amazing story behind all of this, and I'm going to go back to a year ago. I had a friend on a live stream that was selling a bunch of their items, and they had what you would call maybe an online auction. And one of the items they were selling was a bean pot. And I never heard of a bean pot before, and I thought it seemed like such a neat idea. You put your beans in and you put it in the oven really slow for a long time, and it's supposed to make them really good. Now, this bean pot was going on auction. So I sat and watched, and I didn't auction on it at all. I just sat and watched it, and a person bought it. And I thought, wow, that is really neat. And the person that was giving the auction explained what a bean pot was, and I was really fascinated with it, but I didn't put any money towards it, and I was just watching the auction because I figured it would bring a lot more than what I could pay. And somebody bought it, and I was so happy for them. And this was a year ago. And that person, after they bought it, they said, now that is for Tessie. I was so excited. I couldn't believe it. Here, somebody bought this bean pot for me. I was so happy. And so I waited and waited and waited for my bean pot. I've waited over 365 days for my bean pot, which never came. In fact, I still never received the bean pot that was paid for. So it has become a joke about the missing bean pot or the disappearing bean pot. And we laugh about it, and I think it's quite funny looking back on it now. Secretly, Tammy and Tim had their own little bean pot surprise for me. Tammy had a bean pot and she didn't use it. And she thought she was going to give it to me. And then she saw on an online auction where they had a bean pot, and she thought it was a little bit different, and she bought it. And when she picked it up, it was the exact same bean pot that she had. And my friends, Tessie got her bean pot. So this is a bean pot, and although I never received it from the original person, I did get a bean pot, and I'm so excited for it. It has just made me so happy that they secretly had this surprise for me. So today on Crock Pot Wednesday, we're going to make homemade baked beans the old-fashioned way using a bean pot. I have a double batch of the baked beans, and we had them soaking overnight. Now I'm going to go ahead and rinse them, and now I have to cook them for about an hour and 15 minutes. And when they're cooked, then we're going to drain them, and we're going to put everything together and bake them in the bean pot. I'll get back to you in a little over an hour. Then cook them for an hour and a half, and this is what it looks like. So now what we're going to do is we're going to assemble all of our ingredients. So I'm going to show you the direct recipe at the end of this video. It calls for some bacon. So I'm just going to cut up some of my bacon like this. Now the bacon is raw because we are going to have this in the oven for a long time. In fact, we're going to have this in the oven for a couple hours, at least 3 hours. So the bacon will cook up in the oven. I don't really know how much this is. It calls for a 1/3 pound, So this is probably about a 1/3 pound. It might be even a little more than that. So I'm using one of my kitchen scissors to cut up this bacon. This is one of those things that is not a convenience food. It takes a while to make, but it is oh so good. Then it calls for 2 cups of hot water, which I use 2 cups of the water that I used to boil the beans in. And then it calls for 1½ cups of brown sugar. This is a very old-time recipe. Two teaspoons of salt, which of course then we're going to add it for 4 because I doubled it. It calls for 1 medium onion, and I am going to use a ½ cup of dried onion flakes because I don't have any fresh at the moment. A ½ teaspoon of ½ teaspoon of cinnamon. This is something I've never had in my baked beans before. And then 3/4 of a teaspoon of some dried mustard. Now that is all this recipe calls for, but I am going to add a cup of ketchup because I have never had baked beans without the ketchup, and I like ketchup. I like the tomato-based baked beans, so we're going to go with a ½ cup and see what that looks like. Now when I give you the recipe, it's not going to have ketchup in it, but ketchup to me just, I think it's so much better. I'm actually going to go with a cup of ketchup. Now you can put this in your crock pot on high for about 3, 4, 5 hours, but this is what I'm going to do with my baked beans. And I'm going to show you what a bean pot looks like. So a bean pot is like this. It's a ceramic dish with a beautiful ceramic lid. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to put all of our beans in our bean pot. Grandma's recipes. It's a beautiful day in the homestead. The sun is shining and it's actually really not that cold. So I'm going to be working on some outside chores while our baked beans are cooking. I always try to hang up my clothing whenever possible outside. We have perfect sun and perfect breeze. We've had a year full of rain. It's hard to believe there's not a cloud in the sky. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to finish hanging up my wash, and before you know it, our beans will be finished. And it took a lot more hours than I thought it would. It said 3 hours, but I doubled the recipe, so it actually took about 6 hours. So you want to make sure that you have them in long enough. Beautiful baked beans, nothing like anything you'd buy in the store. So I fixed up my plate. I'm waiting for Chevy Man to get home. Beautiful. Don't they look so pretty? So what I have is I have a salad and have some baked beans and I have some potato. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to give it a try. An old-fashioned recipe. Try an old-fashioned baked bean one. It's really great. And if you're lucky enough to have a bean pot, so good. The flavor, there's nothing like it. Amazing. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. And try some baked beans. Real good. If you don't like as sweet as the recipe, you can always cut out the sugar. That's what I did. I cut out the sugar. I didn't add as much sugar to it. Also added the ketchup. The ketchup gives it a much better flavor. So you can tweak your recipe however you like it. The recipe is very old. So take care, everyone. We'll see you guys tomorrow. And it's time for Fanny's diary. We're on December 19th, 1942. And her entry is quite humorous. All she wrote was, "Today I cleaned the chicken."